Great to be here, second year in a row that I've spoken at the GAF booth, and I should note that GAF was our first corporate sponsor of the Resilient Design Institute, something that we much appreciate, reflecting GAF's commitment not only to sustainability but to resilience and the key role that roofing, for example, plays in creating more resilient buildings. So I want to do three things this afternoon, just very briefly. First, I want to define what is resilience. As the Resilient Design Institute defines it, resilience is the capacity to adapt to changing conditions and to maintain or regain functionality and vitality in the face of stress or disturbance. So it's about bouncing back from whatever the disturbance might be, whether it's a storm, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a power outage caused by a terrorist event, whatever that interruption or disturbance might be. I like to describe it not only bouncing back, but bouncing forward. In other words, using the crisis, whatever it might be, as an opportunity to fix some problems and go beyond what was there before. Second, why do we care about resilience? Well, there are a number of reasons. First, it's a good thing to keep people safe. We focus a lot on that. Our building codes are defined about around life safety issues. Clearly should be a high priority with all buildings and our communities. Second, all the evidence points to a changing climate. We need to be doing everything we can to mitigate climate change. In other words, to reduce carbon emissions and reduce the increase in global warming that's occurring. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about adaptation. What can we do to make our buildings more adaptable to changing conditions that we are going to experience, that we are already experiencing? So resilience is a lot about that. Third, and this is sort of my origin in getting involved with resilience, it's an opportunity, or it's a motivation to create greener, more sustainable buildings and communities. I've been involved with GreenBuilding, as Marty mentioned, for a long time, having founded Building Green, publisher of environmental building news back initially in the 1980s. And after 35 years of pushing sustainability and green building, I've recognized that we're not making rapid enough progress. You know, in the face of the evidence of climate change, we need to be doing a better job. So I see resilience as a different motivation that may appeal to a different segment of society. You know, most of us at GreenBuild are, certainly committed to the principles of sustainability and doing the right thing. But there are a lot of political spectrums out there, and we need to be reaching across the aisle and focusing on the red states as well as the blue states, and resilience provides this different motivation. Even if you're not a believer in climate change, you're a believer, I'm guessing, that your family should be safe with whatever the next occurrence might be that causes a power outage or flooding or what have you. So, I see this resilience as a way to motivate more people to create the kinds of solutions that resilience provides. So that brings me to the third issue. What does resilience encompass? And it's a lot of things. The most obvious in the years after Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina here in the Gulf Coast, it's about creating buildings and communities that can withstand flooding and storm events. That's certainly gotten the attention up north with Sandy. It's my first involvement with this when I got involved following Hurricane Katrina in 2005, looking at strategies to make the rebuilding that would happen here in the Gulf Coast more sustainable and more resilient. So that's one part of resilience, buildings that will survive storms and flooding. And there are a lot of specific things we can do, where we build, how we can elevate buildings, elevating mechanicals and electrical equipment in buildings to keep them out of the flood zone, providing wet flood proofing, a FEMA-defined strategy for spaces that you allow to get wet in the event of flooding, but you put in materials that can dry out again. And you can also provide barriers to that flooding. Another aspect of resilience is keeping people safe in buildings that lose power. When we have a storm or an event, whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake, there's often a series of cascading impacts that occur. It's not just that immediate event, but it's the events that follow. And resilience is partly about keeping people safe in homes after that event has occurred. So, among the strategies for that are creating really good building envelopes, super insulating our buildings and providing passive solar design so that that building, whether it's a home or apartment or school, will keep people safe in the event of extended loss of power or interruptions in heating fuel. That's very much the focus of the energy efficiency movement and the green parts of the green building movement to create extremely energy efficient buildings. And those are a very important strategy for resilience. It's not just keeping buildings that lose power from getting too cold in the winter. It's about keeping them from getting too hot in the summer. And in many larger buildings in our more urban areas, cooling loads are a much bigger challenge than heating loads. So, there are many cooling load avoidance strategies that come into play with resilience. Resilience is about buildings that can get by with less water or be able to access water if the grid goes down. In rural areas that aren't on municipal wastewater, people drill their own wells and have deep well submersible pumps. Resilience is about strategies for being able to pump water in the event of loss of power. In urban areas that are served by municipal water, often in taller buildings like multifamily affordable housing or residential condominiums, the municipal water pressure will only bring water so high in a building. Those buildings rely on pumps in the building to push water higher. So one strategy for resilience is looking at how to provide access to water on lower levels so that residents in that building can at very least come down to a lower floor above flood elevation, but down to a lower floor and at least fill up containers to take up to their apartments if they lose water. Resilience is about redundant systems, whether it's power or cooking, different ways to solve the needs that we all have in our homes and communities. Resilience is about community. At the community scale, is about creating situations where people get to know their neighbors and look out for one another. We've recognized in looking at disasters like Katrina and Sandy in New York City, your neighbors are your first responders. And to the extent we can get people to know their neighbors better and stronger, tighter-knit communities, they're going to be much more resilient when there's a disaster. So that's a very important part of it. Resilience is also about land use issues and accessibility to key services. If we lose if there's a gasoline shortage or an inability to pump gasoline because of a power outage. We found with Hurricane Sandy up in the mid-Atlantic area, when power was lost, most of the fuel stations, most gas stations could not operate. They didn't have backup generators, so it caused huge problems in mobility. So, one aspect of resilience is looking at the redesign of communities to make them more pedestrian friendly and more bicycle friendly, accessible to key services. And then finally, you can even look at resilience as part of food security. There's concern in some parts of the country that we're way too dependent on California or the Midwestern grain belt. And what happens if there's an extended drought in California and that flow of our produce turns off? So resilience is partly about creating and maintaining the ability to produce local food, even in our urban and suburban areas. So these are some of the issues that we look at with resilience. 2.5 years ago, I launched the Resilient Design Institute to address these issues, and I did this after 25 years with Building Green, publishing environmental building news. And it's very complementary to the green building agenda, but it's a little different. There's some aspects of resilience that are even in conflict with green building practices. Some of the redundancies result in greater resource consumption, more material use, having redundant water systems or electrical systems, for example. But most of the strategies for resilience are the very same strategies we've been advancing in the green building community, just the motivation is different. And it becomes a life safety argument rather than simply doing the right thing. And that's coming back to this argument for why I'm focusing my attention on resilience. It's to bring more people into the tent of what GreenBuild is all about and the kinds of solutions that are being promoted by companies exhibiting here and the U.S. Green Building Council and all of those efforts. So if you're interested in resilience, visit our website, resilientdesign.org. Let me know if you'd like to get involved in some way, and look forward to hearing from you. Provide input to some of the blogs that have been posted. And again, thank you very much. So I guess I have time for some questions if there are any. So the question is, can resilience become more of a code issue? I think very definitely, and I think it's a push to codify a lot of green practices for environmental reasons, because codes were developed for life safety. We have seismic codes that emerged after the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. We have fire codes that resulted from the Great Chicago Fire, structural codes from some key building collapses in New York City and elsewhere. And I believe through resilience, it can provide a motivation to put into building codes much more robust energy standards and some of these other strategies for access to water and some of these others. So yes, very definitely. Great question. Yeah, great question about the tie-in between resilience and natural systems. And actually my background is in environmental biology, and that's a great interest of mine. And I'd love to explore some of these issues, and I've thought about organizing some symposia to address some complex issues and issues that are quite controversial. But for example, with climate change occurring and natural ecosystems migrating north, do humans need to intervene with nature and help seed forests with more southern species to speed the migration of forests? My concern, if that doesn't happen on some level, invasive species will come in that are able to fill those ecological niches. When I was involved 9 years ago in writing the New Orleans principles following Hurricane Katrina, a significant part of those principles address things like restoring the coastal wetlands that historically protected New Orleans from storm surge. And when those were lost, there was a tremendous risk that the city was facing because of that loss. And the channelizing of the Mississippi River through levees, on up to Missouri, have really worsened the problem and eliminated those natural processes from happening. The floodplains exist for a reason, and when we take those away, the sediment load of the Mississippi River all flows out into the Gulf of Mexico now and doesn't, settle out here in the Delta and rebuild the soil. So you get the subsidence, subsiding land, and that exacerbates all these problems. So, very good question, and yes, there's a very strong link between natural systems and resilience. The two sides should talk more. Yeah. The biophilia issue and biomimicry are really interesting. We can see, just tremendous examples in nature of resilience, and we can learn from those experiences. Yeah, how can people stay in touch with the discussion? We're trying with the Resilient Design Institute in our website, resilientdesign.org, to provide a forum for that ongoing conversation. I'd love to figure out a way to seed it a little better and get more active dialogue going and more participation in that. So, visit the site, submit some comments on the blogs. Just drop me an email if you'd like to submit a blog. We'd love to get a much more active dialogue going. And there are other organizations that are playing a very active role with resilience today. The American Institute of Architects is doing a lot in establishing sort of resilience hubs around the country. I'm working with the U.S. Green Building Council on developing a pilot credit on resilience. Actually, we have a first meeting coming up at this conference here to discuss that, and there's certainly plenty of room for engagement in those kinds of discussions. Yeah, the question, will we ever see a LEED-like standard for resilience? It's possible, and there is talk about that. There's a REDI standard, R-E-D-I, that's earthquake-focused, that's being talked about in California. There's the Resilient STAR program that the federal government is involved with. There's the Fortified program, Fortified Home, Fortified Business, that the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety has developed. And that's a standard in a sense. And with the LEED credit that we hope to develop on resilience, those would certainly be ways to achieve certain requirements in that credit or series of resilience credits. So yeah. All right.